Welcome to Mystic Sleep Tales. Wherever you are, relax and let the weight of the day slowly lift from you. There is nothing demanding your attention right now, nothing requiring you to be anywhere other than where you are. The hours before this have already passed, and the hours after this will take their course. Loosen your shoulders a little and allow the small muscles around your eyes to relax. There is no rush here, no destination. Just this gentle, unhurried drift, a slow departure from the noise and hustle of the waking world. Let the night remind you that it is a gentle and patient friend, asking nothing from you but rest. And there, as you breathe softly, I will begin to tell you a quiet little story, slow-paced and requiring very little from your imagination. It takes place in a very ancient time, in a small, enclosed, and completely safe place, and nothing of great importance is happening within it. Just a place to be, a scene to rest your thoughts, much like resting your gaze on the ever-burning flame of a candle. So let us begin, not with any great announcement or flourish, but gently, as one might open a familiar door and step into a room already known and already warm. Let us go there together, you and I, slowly and without expectation, and let whatever thoughts remain from the day drift past like leaves carried along by a slow and quiet stream. Somewhere in England, in one of those narrow streets that wind behind the grander avenues of a provincial town, there is a yard. It is not a large yard. It sits at the back of a modest establishment, enclosed on three sides by walls of dark brick, the kind that has weathered many seasons of English rain and carries now a deep, mottled hue somewhere between the color of strong tea and the bark of an old elm. The fourth side of the yard opens, through a wooden gate that stands half ajar at this late hour, onto a cobbled lane, though there is no one walking along it now, and no sound comes from beyond its stones. It is evening. The light has long since faded from the sky, and what illumination there is comes from a single gas lamp fixed to the wall near the gate, its flame burning low and steady behind a glass pane faintly clouded with soot. The lamp casts a pool of amber light across the nearest flagstones, a gentle circle that fades at its edges into the softer darkness of the rest of the yard. Above, the sky is not entirely dark, but holds that deep, bruised quality of an autumn evening, a color that is almost blue but also almost gray, with here and there the faintest suggestion of a star showing itself between the rooftops. This is a carpet beater's yard, and the work of the day is very nearly done. All afternoon, and indeed for much of the morning as well, the yard has been a place of steady, methodical labor, the kind of work that is done with the hands and the arms and the patience of long habit. Carpets and rugs of various sizes and conditions have been carried out through the back door of the establishment, slung over thick wooden rails that stand in a row across the center of the yard, and beaten with wrought-tan beaters until the dust rose from them in pale, drifting clouds that hung in the air for a moment before dispersing into the afternoon breeze. But that was hours ago. The dust has long since settled. The air is cleared, and now the yard is quiet, and the rugs that remain are clean. They hang from the rails in neat, orderly rows, these cleaned rugs and carpets, their colors deepened by the evening dimness into rich, warm tones that one can only half see in the lamplight. There is a large Axminster carpet nearest the wall, its floral pattern of crimson roses and trailing green leaves just visible in the amber glow, the thick wool pile, smooth and brushed and free of the fine gray dust that had clung to it when it arrived that morning. Beside it hangs a smaller rug, a Brussels carpet of tightly looped pile, its geometric pattern of interlocking diamonds rendered in shades of indigo and cream that look, in this low light, almost like a pattern of dark water and pale stone. And beyond these, further from the lamp, other rugs and carpets hang in the dimness, their shapes and colors only suggested quiet presences in the gathering dark. The flagstones underfoot are damp, not from rain, but from the careful sponging that was applied to them earlier in the day when the worst of the dust had fallen. They have been swept clean, and the thin film of moisture that remains catches the lamplight in small, irregular gleams, like coins scattered carelessly across the ground. A wooden bucket sits near the wall, half filled with water that has gone cold and gray with the residue of the day's work, and beside it a stiff bristled brush rests on its side, its handle worn smooth by many hands. These are the ordinary furnishings of a working yard, the tools and remnants of honest labor, and they ask nothing of the eye but a passing glance. There is a man in the yard. He is not young, nor is he old, but somewhere in between, the kind of age at which the body has settled into its habits and the hands know their work without being told. He wears a plain cotton shirt, the sleeves rolled to the elbows despite the cool of the evening, and a heavy canvas apron that reaches to his knees, its surface marked with the faint, pale streaks of dust that no amount of brushing can entirely remove from such a garment. His hair is the color of chestnuts, or perhaps a little darker, and it falls across his forehead in a way that suggests he has been too busy to push it back. His name does not matter very much for our purposes. He is simply the man who tends the yard, the one who does the final work of the evening, the quiet tasks that come after the larger labors are complete. Just now, he is standing before one of the hanging carpets, the large Axminster with the crimson roses, and he is running his hand along its surface, slowly and carefully, the way one might stroke the neck of a patient horse. He is feeling for any remaining dust, any small imperfection that the beating might have missed, any tuft of wool that had been displaced, or any thread that has come loose from the pile. His fingers move with a kind of thoughtless expertise, a knowledge that lives in the tips of the fingers themselves rather than in any conscious deliberation. He finds nothing amiss. The carpet is clean, its pile smooth and even, its colors as bright as they will ever be in this dim light. He nods to himself, a small, satisfied movement, and moves on to the next. This is the final dusting, the last inspection before the rugs are rolled and set aside for collection in the morning. It is a task that could, perhaps, be hurried, but this man does not hurry it. He takes each rug in turn, running his palms across its surface, pausing now and then to brush away some imagined fleck of debris or to smooth a wrinkle in the fabric where it drapes over the rail. The work has a rhythm to it, the slow, unhurried rhythm of a task performed many hundreds of times before, and in the quiet of the evening, with only the soft hiss of the gas lamp and the occasional distant chime of a church bell to accompany him, that rhythm becomes something almost musical, a gentle repetition that soothes the ear as much as the mind. He moves from a Brussels carpet to a smaller piece, a hearth rug of thick, dark wool, its surface dense and springy to the touch. This one was brought in by a young woman earlier that day, carried over her arm like a sleeping child, its fringed edges trailing behind her as she walked through the gate. She had been apologetic about its condition, explaining that it had lain before a coal fire all winter and had gathered soot and ash into its fibers until its original pattern, a simple border of oak leaves, had been almost entirely obscured. But the beating and brushing have restored it, and now the oak leaves are visible again, picked out in a warm brown against the darker ground, and the fringe hangs clean and straight, each strand separate and orderly. The man runs his hand across it once, twice, and then moves on. There is no haste in any of this. The night is not going anywhere, and neither is he. The rugs will be rolled when they are rolled, and the yard will be closed when it is closed, and the walk home through the quiet streets will happen in its own good time. For now, there's only the work, and the work is almost a kind of rest in itself. So familiar is it, so gentle in its demands. The man's breathing is slow and even. His footsteps on the damp flagstones are soft, barely audible, just a faint, rhythmic padding as he moves from one rug to the next. Let us pause here for a moment and simply look at the yard the way one might pause at a window and look out at a familiar garden. The walls of dark brick rise on three sides, their surfaces textured with age and weather. The mortar between the bricks a paler shade that catches the lamplight in thin, bright lines. Here and there, a tuft of moss has taken root in a crack, a small green presence that softens the geometry of the brickwork and speaks of damp seasons past. Near the base of the far wall, where the shadow is deepest, a trail of ivy has crept along the ground, its leaves dark and glossy, each one catching a tiny point of reflected light like a small, green mirror. The wooden rails from which the carpets hang are sturdy things, thick as a man's wrist, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. They are supported at each end by iron brackets fixed into the walls, and where the iron meets the wood, a faint rust stain has bled into the grain, a gentle discoloration that speaks of many seasons of English damp. The rails are set at a height that allows the largest carpets to hang clear of the ground, their lower edges just brushing the flagstones if they are of sufficient length, and the smaller rugs hang higher, their fringed ends swaying very slightly in whatever movement of air finds its way into the yard. Above the yard, the sky continues its slow deepening. The last trace of daylight, that thin, pale band that clings to the western horizon long after the sun is gone, has faded now, and the sky is a uniform darkness relieved only by the occasional star and the faint, diffuse glow that rises from the town itself, the combined light of 1,000 gas lamps and parlor candles and hearth fires burning behind curtained windows. It is a gentle glow, nothing harsh or glaring, and it lends the upper edges of the yard walls a soft, almost luminous quality, as though the bricks themselves were giving off a faint warmth. From somewhere beyond the yard, beyond the cobbled lane and the buildings that line it, there comes the sound of a church clock striking the hour. The sound travels slowly through the still air, each chime arriving with a kind of unhurried deliberation, as though the clock itself were in no great rush to announce the time. The man in the yard pauses in his work and listens, counting the strokes without thinking, a habit so deeply ingrained that he could no more stop himself from counting than he could stop himself from breathing. 9 o'clock. The evening is well established now. The shops along the high street will have closed their shutters and turned their signs. The public houses will be warm and full of quiet conversation, the murmur of voices and the clink of glass drifting out through half-open doors. But here in the yard, There is only the echo of the last chime, fading slowly into silence, and then the silence itself, settling back over the flagstones and the hanging rugs like a familiar garment resumed. The man returns to his work. He has reached a carpet of particular fineness, a Wilton of cut pile, its surface as smooth and dense as velvet, its pattern a repeating motif of small medallions in shades of burgundy and gold against a ground of deep forest green. It is the kind of carpet that would grace a drawing room, the kind that would lie beneath the feet of people who never thought about the work that went into keeping it clean. He handles it with a particular care, his fingers light upon its surface, his movements slow and precise. He finds a small thread, a single loose strand of wool, barely visible, and he teases it gently back into the pile with his thumb, pressing it down until it disappears among its fellows. It is such a small thing, such a tiny correction, and yet there is a satisfaction in it that is as real and as quiet as the evening itself. The gas lamp on the wall flickers once, a momentary dimming and brightening that sends a brief, dancing shadow across the nearest flagstones and then settles again to its steady glow. Gas lamps do this from time to time, a small irregularity in the flow of gas through the pipe, and it is nothing to remark upon, nothing to cause concern. The flame resumes its quiet burning behind the clouded glass, and the amber light resumes its gentle pooling across the stones, and the yard resumes its stillness, as though the flicker had never happened, as though the light had always been steady and the shadows had always been still. The man moves on. The next rug is a runner, long and narrow, the kind that would be laid along a hallway or up a flight of stairs, its edges bound with a sturdy braid that has been restitched in places where the wear of feet has pulled it loose. The pattern is simpler than the Wiltons, a plain stripe of alternating colors, red and fawn and a soft, dusty blue, and the pile is shorter and coarser, made to withstand the daily passage of boots and shoes and the dragging of skirt hems. It is a working carpet, a practical thing, and yet in the lamplight, with its colors warmed and its surface freshly cleaned, it has a quiet dignity of its own, a modest beauty that asks for nothing more than to be noticed and perhaps appreciated for a moment before the eye moves on. The man runs his hand along its length, from one end to the other, a single, slow stroke that takes him several steps along the rail. He checks the braid at the edges, pressing it flat where it is curled, and he examines the fringe at each end, combing it lightly with his fingers until the strands hang straight and even. Then he stands back and looks at it, his head tilted slightly to one side, the way a painter might regard a canvas, and after a moment he nods, satisfied, and moves to the next piece. The air in the yard has grown cooler now, noticeably so, with that particular quality of cool that comes on an autumn evening in England, a coolness that is not sharp or biting, but soft and damp, carrying with it the faintest scent of earth and fallen leaves and the clean, mineral smell of wet stone. It settles on the skin like a gentle compress, and it deepens the stillness of the yard, as though the cool itself were a kind of silence, a quieting of the air that makes even the softest sounds seem clearer and more distinct. The hiss of the gas lamp, the distant barking of a dog, somewhere far away, muffled by walls and distance until it is barely more than a suggestion of sound. The faint creak of the wooden gate as a breath of air moves it on its hinges, no more than half an inch in either direction, a slow, almost imperceptible rocking. The man has finished his inspection of the hanging rugs, and has begun the second part of his evening's work, the rolling. This is done carefully, methodically, with the kind of attention that comes not from anxiety, but from long practice and a genuine regard for the materials in his care. He begins with the runner, lifting it from the rail with both hands and laying it flat upon a clean section of flagstone that he has set aside for this purpose. A dry area near the wall, where a square of old canvas has been spread to keep the cleaned rugs from contact with the damp ground. He kneels at one end of the runner and begins to roll it, his hands moving in a steady, even rhythm, pressing the fabric gently as he goes to ensure that no air is trapped within the roll and that the edges remain aligned. The motion is hypnotic in its regularity, a slow, forward-leaning movement followed by a slight pause as he adjusts his grip, then another forward lean, and another, and another. The roll grows thicker as he works his way along the length of the runner, and when he reaches the end, he tucks the fringed edge neatly beneath the roll and ties the whole with a length of cotton cord that he takes from his apron pocket, looping it twice around the roll and securing it with a simple knot. He sets the rolled runner aside, propping it upright against the wall, where it leans at a gentle angle, and returns to the rail for the next piece, the hearth rug with the oak leaf border. He lifts it down with the same care, the same quiet attention, and lays it on the canvas, smoothing it flat with his palms before beginning the roll. The thick wool resists slightly, wanting to spring back against his hands, and he presses a little more firmly, coaxing it into compliance with a patience that seems as much a part of him as his hands themselves. The roll is smaller this time, shorter and fatter, and when he ties it, he uses a shorter length of cord, knotting it neatly and tucking the loose end beneath the first loop. One by one, the rugs come down from the rails. The Brussels carpet with its diamond pattern, a small Turkish rug, its colors rich and deep, its piles soft as moss. A plain drugget of heavy linen, its surface stiff and unyielding, the easiest of all to roll because it holds its shape without persuasion. Each one is laid flat, smoothed, rolled, tied, and set aside, and with each one the rails grow emptier and the row of rolled carpets against the wall grows longer, a tidy assemblage of soft cylinders, each one containing within its coiled layers the patterns and colors and textures of some household's floor, some family's parlor or hallway or bedchamber. The work proceeds in silence, or what passes for silence in the nighttime of a town. There are sounds, of course, there are always sounds, but they are distant and muted, and they do not intrude upon the stillness of the yard so much as they frame it, the way a gilt border frames a quiet painting. The occasional clatter of a carriage on a far-off street, the iron-shod wheels striking the granite setts with a sound that carries through the still air like a distant drum. The murmur of voices from a public house several streets away, rising and falling in a rhythm as regular and as meaningless as the lapping of water against a stone quay. The soft, intermittent hooting of an owl from the churchyard that lies beyond the rooftops to the east, a sound so gentle and so familiar that it seems less a sound than a part of the silence itself, a note that belongs to the quiet the way a thread belongs to a cloth. The man works on, unhurried, his breathing slow and steady, his movements measured and sure. The Wilton carpet with its medallions of burgundy and gold is the next to come down, and he handles it with the particular care he reserves for the finer pieces, lowering it from the rail with both arms extended, as though receiving something precious, and carrying it the few steps to the canvas with a slow, deliberate walk that is almost ceremonial in its solemnity. He lays it down, smooths it, and begins the roll, his hands moving with that same hypnotic rhythm, that same quiet, forward-leaning motion, and the thick, soft pile compresses gently beneath his palms, yielding to his touch with a silky compliance that speaks of quality and craftsmanship. As he works, his mind drifts, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that it settles. The way sediment settles in still water, the way dust settles in a room where no one is moving. The thoughts that occupied him earlier in the day, the small concerns and calculations of a working life, have faded now, retreating to whatever part of the mind stores such things during the hours of rest. In their place, there is a quietness, a spaciousness, a calm that is not empty but full of the present moment and its simple sensory richness. The feel of the wool beneath his hands, the cool of the air on his forearms, the amber glow of the lamp, the smell of clean carpet and damp stone, and the faintest trace of coal smoke drifting from some nearby chimney. These things fill him without crowding him, and he moves through the work as though moving through a gentle dream, aware of everything and troubled by nothing. The Axminster carpet is the last to come down, and it is the heaviest, the substantial thing, its weight distributed across his arms and shoulders as he lifts it from the rail. He carries it to the canvas and lets it settle, the thick wool pile pressing flat against the ground with a soft, heavy sigh, as though the carpet itself were relieved to be lying down at last after a long day of hanging. He kneels beside it and smooths it with slow, broad strokes, his palms gliding across the crimson roses and the trailing green leaves, and for a moment he pauses, his hand resting on the surface, and simply looks at it, the pattern picked out in the lamplight, the colors glowing with a quiet warmth that seems to come from within the wool itself rather than from the lamp above. Then he begins the roll, and because the carpet is large and heavy, the rolling takes longer, the motion slower, the effort greater, though he gives no sign of strain. His arms move in their steady rhythm, pressing, leaning, adjusting, pressing again, and the great roll of carpet grows beneath his hands, thickening with each revolution until it is as round and solid as a bolster. When he reaches the end, he ties it with a double length of cord, knotting it securely, and then he stands and lifts the roll upright, setting it against the wall with the others. The rails are empty now. They stand in their row across the center of the yard, bare and pale in the lamplight, their surfaces smooth and faintly gleaming where the moisture of the evening air has settled upon them. Without the carpets draped over them, they have a stripped, expectant quality, like clotheslines after the washing has been taken in, or like the bare branches of winter trees waiting for the spring. But there is nothing melancholy in their emptiness. It is simply the natural state of things at this hour. The work is done, and the tools of the work stand ready for tomorrow. The man looks at the row of rolled carpets leaning against the wall and counts them silently, a finger moving in the air as his lips form numbers without sound. 7. 7 carpets, cleaned and rolled and tied, ready for their owners to collect them in the morning. Mrs. Pemberton's Axminster, the runner from the solicitor's office on Bridge Street, the Turkish rug that belongs to the vicar's wife, the hearth rug that the young woman brought in. He knows them all, knows their histories and their owners and their particular needs, the way a doctor knows his patients or a shepherd knows his flock. Each one has been in his care for a day, or sometimes two, and each one will leave his yard in better condition than it arrived, and that is the whole of his ambition, the full extent of his professional pride. He unties his apron and folds it with the same care he has applied to the carpets, pressing the creases flat with his hands and folding it into a neat square that he tucks under his arm. He picks up the stiff bristled brush from beside the bucket and carries it to its hook on the wall, hanging it by the hole in its handle, and then he empties the bucket into the drain in the corner of the yard, the gray water running away with a soft, gurgling sound that fades to a trickle and then to nothing. He sets the bucket upside down beside the drain, a habit that keeps the rain from filling it overnight, and steps back to survey the yard one last time. Everything is in order. The flagstones are clean. The rolled carpets stand neatly against the wall. The rails are bare and straight. The brush hangs on its hook. The bucket sits on its rim. There's nothing out of place, nothing forgotten, nothing left undone. The yard is as tidy and as settled as a room in which the fire has been banked for the night, and the candles have been blown out, and the curtains have been drawn against the dark. He stands there for a moment, his hands at his sides, his breathing slow and deep, and he lets the stillness of the yard settle over him like a cloak. The gas lamp hisses softly. The air is cool against his face. Somewhere a long way off, a dog barks twice and then falls silent. The church clock will not strike again for another 3/4 of an hour, and in the meantime, the silence is complete, or as complete as silence ever is in a town where people are still awake behind their walls and their windows, living their small, quiet, evening lives. He does not move. There is no reason to move, not yet. The walk home can wait another minute, another 2 minutes, another 5. The night is patient, and so is he. He stands in the yard with his folded apron under his arm and his face turned up to the sky, and he breathes the cool, damp air, and he listens to the silence, and he feels the flagstones beneath his boots, solid and cold and real, and for a little while, that is enough. That is everything. Let us stay with him in this moment, and let us look more closely at the yard as it is now, in its state of completed quiet. The walls of brick that surround it have taken on a different character in the deepened darkness, their surfaces no longer merely old and weathered, but possessing a kind of solidity that seems to belong as much to time as to substance. These bricks were fired in a kiln somewhere in the surrounding countryside, shaped from local clay and baked until they turned the color of old port wine, and they have stood here through seasons beyond counting, through summers when a mortar baked dry and contracted in the heat, and winters when the frost crept into the cracks and expanded with a force that no handmade thing can entirely resist. And yet they stand. They hold their shape and their position, and the yard they enclose is as square and as firm as it was the day they were laid. The mortar between the bricks has its own quiet story, its own slow history of settling and hardening and accepting the weight that is placed upon it. In the lamplight, it appears as a network of thin, pale lines, a grid of soft whitish color against the darker brick, and where the light falls upon it from an angle, it casts tiny shadows that give the wall a texture one can almost feel with the eyes alone, a roughness that is also a kind of warmth, an imperfection that is also a kind of honesty. Nothing in this yard pretends to be more than it is. The walls are walls. The flagstones are flagstones. The rails are rails. And the carpets that have hung here and been beaten and cleaned and inspected and rolled are simply carpets, things made of wool and cotton and dye, things that will lie upon floors and bear the weight of feet and collect the dust of living and be brought back here again, in time for another cleaning. There's a comfort in this ordinariness, a deep and sustaining comfort that asks nothing of the mind and gives everything to the spirit. The yard does not ask to be admired or interpreted or understood. It simply is in the same way that a stone is, or a tree is, or the night sky is, and its being is sufficient, and its stillness is a gift. The man shifts his weight from one foot to the other, a small, unconscious movement, and then he turns and walks slowly toward the gate. His footsteps are soft on the flagstones, barely audible, and as he moves away from the gas lamp, his shadow stretches out behind him, long and thin, reaching back across the stones toward the row of rolled carpets as though reluctant to leave them. He reaches the gate and pauses, his hand on the wooden frame, and looks back at the yard one more time. The lamp burns steadily. The carpets lean against the wall. The empty rails stand pale and straight in the amber light. Everything is exactly as it should be, but he does not go through the gate. Not yet. Instead, he leans against the frame, his shoulder resting against the wood, and he looks out into the cobbled lane. It is empty, as he knew it would be at this hour. The cobblestones stretch away in both directions, their rounded surfaces catching the faint glow from a street lamp further down the lane, a glow that is softer and more diffused than the light in the yard, as though it has been diluted by the distance it has traveled. The houses and shops that line the lane are dark, their windows shuttered, their doors closed, and the only movement is the slow, barely perceptible drift of a thin mist that has begun to settle over the town, a mist so fine and so light that it is more felt than seen, a dampness on the skin, a softening of the edges of things. Mist was common enough on autumn evenings in towns like this one, towns that sat in river valleys or near marshlands where the cool night air drew moisture from the ground and held it suspended in the atmosphere like a vast, invisible curtain. It was not the thick, choking fog of the city, that terrible pea soup mixture of moisture and coal smoke that could turn day into night and make a man lose his way between his own front door and the street. This was gentler, kinder, a natural mist that softened the outlines of buildings and blurred the edges of the gaslight and laid a thin, shining film of moisture on every surface it touched. It made the cobblestones gleam. It made the brick walls darken. It made the air smell of rain, even when no rain had fallen. The man breathes it in, this cool, damp air, and feels it fill his lungs with a freshness that is both bracing and soothing, as though the air itself were a tonic, a medicine for the tiredness that has been gathering in his limbs all day. He has been on his feet since early morning, lifting and carrying and beating and brushing, and his arms and shoulders hold the memory of that labor in a dull, pleasant ache that will deepen into the warm heaviness of sleep once he is home and in his bed. But for now, the ache is simply there, a part of him no more troubling than the weight of his own clothes or the feel of the ground beneath his feet. He turns back into the yard and walks, slowly, along the row of rolled carpets, and as he passes each one, he touches it lightly with his fingertips, a gesture that is part inspection and part farewell. Good night, Mrs. Pemberton's Axminster. Good night, the solicitor's runner. Good night, the vicar's wife's Turkish rug. Good night, the young woman's hearth rug with the oak leaf border. He does not say these words aloud, of course. He is not the sort of man who talks to carpets. But the touch is there, and the thought behind the touch is there. And if the carpets could feel it, they might feel something like gratitude or at least the simple comfort of being tended by careful hands. He reaches the end of the row and stands for a moment beside the overturned bucket and the hanging brush, and he looks at the gas lamp on the wall. It's time to turn it off. The yard does not need light through the night. There is nothing here that requires watching, and the gas is not free. He reaches up and turns the small brass tap that controls the flow, and the flame shrinks, gutters, and goes out, leaving only the faintest smell of gas in the air, a smell that disperses almost immediately in the cool evening breeze. The yard is plunged into a deeper darkness, but not total darkness, for the sky above still holds that faint, diffused glow, and the street lamp in the lane sends a thin sliver of light through the half-open gate, and after a moment, as his eyes adjust, the man can see the shapes of things well enough. The walls, the rails, the rolled carpets, all rendered in shades of gray and blue-black, like a painting done in charcoal on dark paper. He stands in this new darkness and lets it settle around him, and he notices, as he always notices at this moment, how the absence of the lamp changes the quality of the silence. It is not that the silence is deeper, exactly, or more complete, but that it is different, as though the hiss of the gas flame had been a thread running through the fabric of the quiet. And now that it has been removed, the fabric has a different texture, a different weight. He can hear things he could not hear before, or things he was not aware of hearing. The faint rustle of the ivy along the base of the far wall. The distant, rhythmic clop of a horse's hooves on cobblestones, growing slowly louder and then slowly softer as the animal passes along some unseen street. The creak of timber somewhere in the building behind him. The sound of an old structure settling into the cool of the night, adjusting its joints and its beams the way a sleeping person adjusts their limbs. These sounds are not alarming. They are not even interesting in the usual sense of the word. They are simply the sounds of the world going on about its business in the ordinary, unhurried way that it does when no one is paying it any particular attention. And that perhaps is what makes them so soothing, so conducive to the slowing of thought and the softening of perception that precedes sleep. They are evidence that the world is carrying on without you, that the night is taking care of itself, that there is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to watch for, nothing you need to hold in your mind. You can let go. You can drift. You can close your eyes if you like, and the sounds will still be there, gentle and steady and unremarkable, a lullaby composed not of melody, but of the ordinary music of a quiet town, settling into the night. The man goes to the gate now and pulls it closed, the hinges giving a soft, musical creak as the wood swings on its iron pivot. He slides the bolt into place, a thick iron bar that drops into a bracket on the gate post with a dull, satisfying clunk, the sound of something securely fastened, something safely enclosed. The yard is sealed for the night. Nothing will enter it now except the mist and the dark and whatever small creatures of the evening choose to make their way over the walls or under the gate. A hedgehog, perhaps, or a cat on its nightly rounds, or the mice that live in the gap between the wall and the building and emerge at nightfall to explore the flagstones with their quick, delicate feet. He takes one last look at the yard, now almost entirely dark, and then he turns and walks along the narrow passage that lead from the yard to the front of the establishment, where the street lamp on the pavement casts a broader, brighter light, and where the cobblestones of the main road are wider and more evenly set. The passage is short and close, with walls on either side that are near enough to touch with outstretched arms, and the darkness in it is thicker than in the yard, a concentrated darkness that swallows sound and softens the edges of his footsteps until they are barely more than whispers. He knows this passage well enough to walk it with his eyes closed, and perhaps he does, or nearly does, for the darkness hardly allows him to see anything in any case. But let us not follow him out of the yard. Let us remain here in the enclosed quiet, and let the yard be what it is without him, a still, dark, empty space, holding within its walls the memory of the day's work and the promise of tomorrow's. The rolled carpets lean against the wall, their surfaces cool now, the wool contracting very slightly in the night air, the fibers settling into their new positions within the tight wound rolls. The rails stand empty. The flagstones gleam faintly where the mist has laid its moisture upon them. The bucket sits on its rim by the drain. The brush hangs on its hook. The gas lamp is dark and cold, and the silence, which was quiet before, is quieter still, for there is no one in the yard now to disturb it. No breathing, no footsteps, no rustling of cloth. There is only the silence itself, and the things that exist within it, the sounds too small and too gentle to be called sounds, the almost imperceptible vibrations of the physical world going about its patient, endless work. The slow condensation of moisture on the surface of the bricks. The barely audible tick of iron and stone contracting as the temperature drops. The faint, far distant hum of the town, reduced now to its lowest possible volume. A murmur so soft that it might be the murmur of the earth itself, turning on its axis in the dark. If you were here, standing in the center of the yard with the dark sky above you and the dark walls around you and the rolled carpets at your back, you would feel something that is difficult to put into words but easy to recognize, a sense of absolute safety, of perfect enclosure, of being held within a small, still space that asks nothing of you and offers everything that the night can give. The cool air on your skin, the solid ground beneath your feet, the knowledge that the walls are there and the gate is bolted and the carpets are clean and rolled and ready, and the world outside is going on about its business without you, steadily and patiently, as it always has and always will. You might feel, standing there, that your thoughts were slowing down, becoming less urgent, less insistent, less concerned with the business of the day, and more attuned to the simple, physical reality of the present moment. You might notice that your breathing had deepened, that your shoulders had dropped, that the small, habitual tensions in your face and hands and neck had begun to release, one by one, like knots being gently untied. You might notice that the darkness, which had seemed merely dark a moment ago, was in fact full of subtle variations, gradations of gray and blue and black that gave the yard a quiet depth and dimension, as though it were not a flat, enclosed space, but a gentle landscape, a soft and rolling country of shadow and suggestion. And you might find, after a while, that you were no longer thinking at all, not in the usual sense, not in the way that involves words and plans and the weighing of one thing against another. You might find that your mind had become very still, very quiet, very much at rest, and that the yard around you had become a part of that stillness, an extension of it, as though the silence within you and the silence without you were the same silence, flowing together like two streams meeting in a quiet valley. This is perhaps what the yard is for in the deepest sense. Not merely for the cleaning and rolling of carpets, not merely for the practical work of maintaining the fabrics that cover the floors of houses and offices and churches, but for the quiet that comes after the work, for the stillness that settles when the last task is done and the last light is extinguished and the night is allowed to take possession of the space. Every room, every yard, every enclosed and sheltered place has this capacity, this hidden gift, but is most fully realized when the day's purpose has been fulfilled and the day's labor has been completed, and there's nothing left to do but simply be, simply exist, simply rest in the awareness that the work was good and the work is done, and the morning, when it comes, will find everything in order. The mist continues to settle over the town, very gently, very slowly, the way sleep settles over a tired body, by degrees so gradual that there is no single moment when you can say, here is where it began, here is the boundary between waking and rest. The cobblestones in the lane grow wetter. The rooftops grow more indistinct. The stars, those few that were visible, are hidden now behind the soft, gray veil, and the sky is uniform and close, like the low ceiling of a comfortable room. In the yard, the mist lies upon the flagstones like a thin, translucent blanket, and it clings to the surfaces of the rolled carpets, and it beads upon the iron brackets of the empty rails, tiny droplets that catch whatever light there is and hold it, each one a miniature lamp, each one a small, cold, perfect sphere of reflected radiance. Time passes, as it does, unmarked and unremarked. There is no clock in the yard, no way of knowing whether it has been 5 minutes or 20 since the man bolted the gate and walked away through the passage. The church clock will strike again at some point, and the sound will drift across the rooftops and filter through the mist and arrive in the yard with the same unhurried deliberation, and the empty space will receive it and hold it for a moment, and then let it go, as it lets everything go, as it holds nothing but the present and the immediate and the real. A cat appears on the top of the far wall, a dark shape against the slightly less dark sky, moving with that particular feline grace that makes even the most ordinary domestic cat look, for a moment, like something wild and ancient and unknowable. It pauses on the wall and looks down into the yard with eyes that catch and reflect whatever light there is, two small, bright points of green gold in the darkness. It assesses the yard with the cool, unhurried calculation of its kind, and then it descends, flowing down the wall like water, its body long and liquid, and lands on the flagstones without a sound. It crosses the yard at a leisurely pace, its tail held high, and pauses beside the rolled carpets to sniff at them with an expression of mild, disinterested curiosity. It sniffs at Mrs. Pemberton's Axminster. It sniffs at the solicitor's runner. It loses interest and continues on its way, passing through the yard and over the opposite wall with the same fluid ease, disappearing into the night as silently as it arrived. And the yard is empty again, and still again, and quiet again, and the mist continues to settle, and the darkness continues to deepen, and the rolled carpets lean against the wall in their patient, orderly row, waiting for the morning that will come, as mornings always do, in its own good time. Let us look even more closely now, if we may, at the small things, the tiny details that the eye would miss in daylight, but that the mind, in its quietened state, can perceive with a clarity that is almost tender. Consider the surface of the nearest flagstone, for instance. In daylight, it would appear simply gray, a flat, unremarkable surface of natural stone, practical and plain. But in the near darkness, with only the faint diffusion of the mist-softened skylight to reveal it, the stone shows its true character, its subtle variations of color and texture that are the record of its geological history, the millions of years of pressure and heat and mineral deposition that went into its making. There are veins of paler stone running through the gray, like the veins in a leaf, and in places the surface is faintly pitted where softer inclusions have been worn away by the passage of feet and the action of weather. A thin film of moisture lies upon it, and in that film, if one could look closely enough, one might see the reflection of the sky above, a tiny, inverted landscape of gray cloud and distant glow, a world within a world as small and as complete as the yard itself. Or consider the cord that ties the nearest roll of carpet, that simple length of cotton twine that the man took from his apron pocket and looped and knotted with the unthinking skill of long practice. It is a plain thing, undyed and unadorned, its fibers twisted into a thin, strong rope that has a faintly rough texture against the fingers and a color that is somewhere between white and the palest shade of brown. It holds the roll of carpet closed with a quiet authority, a modest tension that is neither too tight nor too loose, and where the knot sits, the fibers are compressed into a small, dense lump that has its own form and its own beauty, the beauty of function perfectly fulfilled, of a simple task done simply and well. Or consider the mist itself, that gentlest of atmospheric phenomena, that softest of all the forms that water takes in its endless cycle of evaporation and condensation and fall. It is nothing more than water, of course, water in its most delicate and ephemeral state, each droplet so small that it floats in the air rather than falling through it, sustained by the slightest movement of the atmosphere, carried on currents too gentle to be called wind. And yet it transforms the world through which it moves, softening edges, blurring boundaries, muting colors, deepening silences. It turns the ordinary into something quieter, something more mysterious, something that invites not investigation but contemplation, not analysis but acceptance. In the yard, the mist is settled now to a thin, even layer that hovers a few inches above the flagstones, giving the ground a ghostly, luminous quality, as though the stones themselves were producing a faint, cold light. The rolled carpets are touched by it too, their surfaces faintly damp, the wool absorbing the moisture with the quiet efficiency of a natural fiber doing what natural fibers do, drawing the water into its structure and holding it there, not as a burden, but as a part of itself, the way a sponge holds water, the way earth holds rain. The rails stand in their row, their surfaces beaded with the same fine droplets, and in the near total darkness, they have become almost invisible, mere suggestions of horizontal lines in the air, pale traces that might be rails or might be nothing at all, the memory of rails, the ghost of rails, the idea of rails hanging in the dark. And the walls, the dark brick walls that enclose the yard on three sides, have receded into the darkness until they are no longer walls but simply presences, solid and reassuring, felt rather than seen, known rather than observed. Somewhere in the town, the lamplighter is making his final rounds, though he will not come down this lane, for there is only one lamp here, and it is the province of the shopkeepers to tend it. He is walking his usual route through the main streets, his long pole resting on his shoulder, his stride unhurried and familiar, and behind him the gas lamps are dimming one by one as he turns down their flames for the small hours, leaving just enough light for any late traveler to find their way. It is a quiet occupation, the lamplighters, and a lonely one at this hour, but it has its own dignity and its own purpose, and the man who performs it moves through the sleeping town with the careful attention of one who understands that even the smallest duties have their value. Even the simplest tasks deserve to be done well. In the yard, none of this is visible, of course. The yard knows nothing of the lamplighter or his rounds, nothing of the streets beyond its walls, nothing of the wider town with its shuttered shops and curtained windows and banked fires. The yard knows only itself, its own dimensions, its own contents, its own particular quality of darkness and quiet. And that is enough. That has always been enough. This is the deepest stillness the yard will know tonight. This hour between the last footstep and the first light of dawn. This long, unbroken interval of quiet in which nothing happens and everything rests. The carpets rest in their rolls. The flagstones rest beneath their film of moisture. The walls rest in their ancient solidity. The air rests, still and cool and damp, carrying the scent of clean wool and wet stone and the faintest, most distant suggestion of coal smoke from the last fires of the evening. And if you are still awake, dear listener, if you are still with me here in this small, dark yard in a town somewhere in England on a cool autumn night in the reign of Queen Victoria, then you too are resting, or very nearly so. Your breathing has slowed, perhaps, to match the slow rhythm of the story itself. Your thoughts have quietened, perhaps, to match the quiet of the yard. Your body has settled, perhaps, into that deep, comfortable heaviness that comes just before sleep, when the muscles release their last hold on the day, and the mind lets go of its last, lingering concerns, and the whole self sinks, gently and gratefully, into the welcoming dark. There is nothing more to tell. The yard is still. The carpets are clean. The night is deep and quiet and kind. Tomorrow, the owners will come to collect their rugs, and the man will untie the cords and unroll the carpets and show them the restored patterns and the freshened colors. And there will be handshakes and small payments and brief conversations about the weather and the state of the roads. And then the yard will fill again with new carpets to be cleaned, and the rails will bear their weight again, and the wrought tan beaters will swing, and the dust will rise and settle. And the whole gentle, purposeful cycle will begin once more. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, there is only the stillness and the darkness and the mist and the clean, rolled carpets leaning against the wall in their patient, orderly row. And there is you, wherever you are, resting now, breathing softly, letting the night carry you gently and steadily toward sleep, toward that warm and quiet place where the mind puts down its burdens and the body finds its ease and the whole world narrows to the simple, perfect comfort of the pillow beneath your cheek and the blanket drawn up around your shoulders and the darkness pressing softly against your closed eyes. Rest now. Let the yard fade. Let the mist dissolve. Let the flagstones and the brickwork and the rolled carpets and the empty rails drift away into the gentle blur of approaching sleep. They will be there in the morning, solid and real and patiently waiting, as they always are. The world does not go anywhere while you sleep. It stays exactly where it is, turning slowly in the dark, carrying you with it, holding you in its vast and patient embrace, steady and sure and unwavering as the ground beneath your feet. And if, In the last moments before sleep takes you, you find yourself thinking of the man who tends the yard, the man with the chestnut hair and the canvas apron and the careful hands. You might imagine him now at home, in his own small room in a terrace house not far from the yard, sitting in a chair by the remains of a coal fire, his boots set side by side on the hearthstone, his stockinged feet stretched toward the fading warmth. He is tired, as he always is at this hour, a pleasant, honest tiredness that sits in his bones like a familiar weight, and he is thinking of nothing at all, or perhaps he is thinking of the morning, of the carpets waiting in the yard, of the people who will come to collect them, of the new ones that will arrive to take their place. But these are not anxious thoughts. They are simply the quiet, forward-looking thoughts of a man whose work is done for the day, and whose conscience is clear, and whose body is ready for rest. He rises from the chair, slowly, and banks the fire with a shovel of ash, pressing it down over the embers until the glow is hidden and the only light in the room comes from a single candle on the mantelpiece. He picks up the candle and carries it to the narrow staircase that leads to his bedroom, and he climbs the stairs with the slow, measured tread of a man who knows every step and every creak and needs no light to find his way. The candle is merely a comfort, a small, warm presence in the darkness of the stairwell, and its flame casts dancing shadows on the whitewashed walls as he ascends. In his room, he sets the candle on the bedside table and sits on the edge of the bed and removes his stockings, folding them neatly and setting them on the chair. He pulls back the covers, heavy woolen blankets and clean cotton sheets that smell faintly of lavender, for his landlady puts sprigs of it between the layers when she makes the beds, and he lies down and draws the covers up to his chin and lies there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, at the play of candlelight on the cracked plaster, at the small, familiar landscape of shadows and shapes that he sees every night before he closes his eyes. Then he leans over and blows out the candle, a single soft breath that extinguishes the flame and plunges the room into darkness, and he settles back against the pillow and closes his eyes, and the darkness is complete, and the silence is deep, and the night is all around him, as it is all around the yard, as it is all around the town, as it is all around you, dear listener, wherever you are, whoever you are. And the only sound is the sound of breathing, slow and steady and deep, the sound of a body at rest, the sound of mind at peace, the sound of sleep approaching, soft and sure and gentle as the mist that settles over the rooftops on a cool autumn evening in England long ago, in a time that was quieter than our own, in a place that was smaller than our own, but in a night that was the same as every night that has ever been or ever will be, the same patient, kind, encompassing darkness, the same promise of rest and renewal, the same soft, steady, unhurried turning of the world. Thank you so much for spending this quiet evening with me. I hope these kind words have lulled you to sleep a little closer, and that the silence of the carpet beater's yard has settled upon your own thoughts like a soft, warm cloth resting on a rested forehead. If you enjoyed this time together, I will be happy to welcome you back whenever you need peace and quiet. Perhaps, if you wish, you could also have a short chat with others who might find solace here, or leave a small note to let us know you're listening. But of course, there are no obligations, none at all. The night asks nothing from you but rest. Sleep well and deeply, and know that morning will come gently, as always, and everything will be in its place, ready and waiting for the new day.